Hey everybody, this is Aaron the Pedantic. Today I want to talk about humanocentric games, which I absolutely adore. And I want to talk about why I adore them. Now, when I first brought it up, the first thing someone said to me was, well, isn't it just because humans are relatable? It's got something to do with it, perhaps. There's maybe some things there that make it a little bit better. Because after all, whenever you have people that are trying to portray characters that are hard for them themselves to understand, that it gets a little bit incoherent. And if you are to just put some elf ears on a human and then call it an elf, then really it's just, I mean, it's just a human skin suit. It's, you know, it's not anything substantial. So really you're putting relatability in there at the expense of the fantastical. And so, yeah, I think that there may be some truth to this, but I think that there's a lot more to it, honestly. And some of it is going to circle back to that. I'm sorry. It just will. It would just will kind of resort back to the idea that we can relate to humans on a deeper level than we can fantastical races that have lifestyles, experiences, and longevity that we just can't compete with, or maybe we dwarf, or we make them dwarf in comparison, is what I'm trying to say. But really, for me, one of the big things is the place of humans in fantasy. A lot of times you will see in fantastical literature and things like that, fiction, that humans basically are these widespread people that, you know, they multiply, they have these grand lives, that they do all kinds of crazy stuff, and then they kick the bucket. And, you know, you have that kind of cliche of people either looking, the elves and things like that, looking at humans in either disgust or amazement at the kinds of things that they do with their short lives. But the humans are off building empires and tearing things down and just all over the place. You know, like it could be absolutely anything. And that's something that I really appreciate about that kind of theme, is, you know, that whole theme of, you know, you're a human, you could be anything. You know, who knows what you are? You a bandit? Are you this? Are you that? And people might say, well, you know, you could do the same thing with dwarves. Of course you could. But dwarves tend to be very lawful. They tend to be very, you know, constrained to their particular society. They have certain things that they're really good at. This is why I like race as class. I know people don't love it, but I do like it. And, you know, with elves, it's kind of the same, you know, thing. And with halflings, it's kind of the same thing. They tend to just be agricultural dudes that like to eat stuff and throw rocks at you if you're mean to them. And I love that. I think that it's fantastic to have that, especially because whenever you have humans everywhere and then you have something fantastical that walks in, guess what? It stands out. I do really appreciate that, because nothing to me is more deflating than just having so much fantastical everywhere that really it just gets kind of boring and dull. It's like that is all I'm seeing is just it's like if you had just had nothing but a constant stream of colors just shot into your eyes 24/7, then after a while you just be praying to just see darkness for a while. And that's kind of what I experience. You know, I like to have I'm just going to use the word bland, even though I'm not really meaning it in a pejorative fashion, because I actually love this. And I don't think it's bland, especially if you're doing it properly. But to have that contrast, there we go, to have that contrast between the normal and the fantastic, have it be a stark contrast rather than, you know, just being one among many. I do think that it can be fun to do that. I'm not saying that it's a terrible idea. One of the campaigns that I plan on doing in the future is really where humans are basically wiped out at this point. And so you have everything else, and trying to make that interesting, where you highlight how all of these different races are very different still. And they're not just humans with, you know, with like the ears put on or the horns or whatever. So I do think that that is a great component that really should be highlighted. Really, though, I think more than anything, it's going to be my favorite fantasy novels. Those are going to be the things that really cemented this for me. Whenever people talk about the stuff that they're interested in, a lot of people that I've seen that talk about the very fantastical stuff being what they're into, they kind of grew up on like Disney, which is fine, you know, like, but I'm talking more like Ferngully. I don't even know if that's a Disney product, but you know, whenever you have a lot of real fantastical creatures, and they're kind of everywhere, then you have like a human among them. And, you know, again, like I said, I'll do that kind of game. I'm fine with that. But then you also have like Harry Potter, where you have all kinds of fantastical creatures and things like that they interact with all the time, and there's magic everywhere and all that kind of stuff. I didn't grow up on that, really. I never really had any interest in Harry Potter. I eventually watched the movies after much hesitation, and I felt like they were adequate. You know, they weren't amazing, but they were adequate. I loved Lord of the Rings, which obviously Lord of the Rings kind of follows the model that I'm talking about, of course. But really, one of the most pivotal ones were either the Transl Saga, which I think is Gary Paulson. I'm not really sure who wrote it. But that one is kind of, it feels a little bit more Appendix N, in that it's like you have a kid that goes to the future, and he's like the last human alive. And I know that kind of sounds contradictory, but I think that's where I get my Sword and Planet kind of interest, is from, even though that really didn't have a whole lot of sci-fi in it. But it has a little bit. I think that's where I get some of that interest. But really, there was another book. I don't even remember what it was called. So I can't even really mention it that much, other than to say that it was just about like a court wizard. And, you know, he was able to cast spells occasionally. And a lot of the danger was people stabbing him to death, and they were all humans. So it's just a little bit different. But really, my favorite author of all time is Dave Duncan, which he's not a very celebrated author. He's done a good job. I say he's done. He has passed away, but his work is primarily humanocentric. One of my favorite series by him, The King's Blades, is all about, basically, you have these people who were, for one reason or another, chosen to go to this academy to be raised as blades, is what they're called. And they train for a long time. Once they train for all that time, then they go through a ritual that binds them to a lord. And this is something that is done for the greatest lords in the realm, or people with a lot of money, basically. And what happens is the ritual is, you know, they get stabbed in the heart. And if it's successful, then they are just enchanted with whoever they are bound to. And they will do anything to keep them alive. To see the person they're protecting die will drive them insane. And there are a lot of really cool things about that. But more than anything, you have very ritualistic magic. You have a focus on humans. There are some fantastical elements, clearly, but they're not really as highlighted. You know, I can't even think of an actual monster or non-human sentient species. Nothing comes to mind. You just have people for the most part. And I really adore that. There was another one called the Jaguar Knights. Well, actually, so that's part of the same series. And with that one, you have some people that are able to kind of transform a little bit, you know, but it's through, again, I think through some kind of rituals and stuff like that. And it's based off of Aztec legend and stuff like that. So then you look at some of his other works. He has the Children of Chaos and the Mother of Lies. Those are two books that they're the Dodeck books. Basically, it's a world that is a dodecahedron, you know, so it's a D12. And I didn't know what that was back then. But with that one, again, it's very humanocentric. It is about humans. There is a lot of magic going on. There are gods and things like that are worshipped, that imbue powers and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, it's about humans quarreling with each other and having those kinds of interactions. Game of Thrones, same situation there. There are fantastical elements in Game of Thrones, but we're focusing on human quarrels. The Alchemist's Apprentice, that whole series by Dave Duncan, yet again, that one is pretty much the same. You have this guy who works for Nostradamus. He's his apprentice, and he does all kinds of cool ritualistic magic shit. I think you can probably start to see why I'm not big on cantrips and just, you know, making magic happen all the time. It just doesn't seem that interesting to me. I like for magic to be, you know, something that has some kind of preparation behind it and all that kind of stuff. And I like for humans to be in the spotlight. That's really what I think it all boils down to. And when I look at a lot of Appendix N literature, I don't see a whole lot where non-humans are really that important. So I think that even then, you know, I think that's part of the reason why I feel a lot of kinship towards those that appreciate Appendix N literature, Appendix N, and why I myself love it. I've loved pretty much every Appendix N book that I've read so far. So, yeah, I think that that's where I wanted to go today. I mean, there are people that can make some kind of arguments and whatnot about why I'm wrong. Somebody did bring up in a very interesting discussion that they feel like the appeal for humanocentric and, or at least just like limiting all kinds of options and things like that in your games, it may be an overreaction and an overcorrection to what people have been exposed to with 5th edition. I'm just going to say there is some of that for me. I feel like, you know, I had so much of the kitchen sink for so long that I just don't want to deal with that anymore. And I want to really focus on these core things and develop those to great amounts and all that kind of stuff. But I don't begrudge anybody who wants to do the kitchen sink or anything like that. If you can pull it off and you can have a great time, then, you know, good for you. I'm proud of you. But that's all I have for this video. There may be some other ones in the pipeline. We shall see. Peace out.